What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to the next deep dive team preview of what has been a very special series so far. Today we're going to be diving into the 22nd ranked Miami Dolphins. Going to be a particularly fun episode here, as this is the first team that I would say, I'm lower on. I don't think you're going to see the Dolphins too much lower than 22 in anybody's power rankings, and especially Dolphins fans have been quite loud, especially this offseason, as they've made a lot of big splashes, no pun intended there for the Dolphins. But it's going to be a really fun one to talk about what areas of this team I am lower on, and of course, to talk about what was a truly special offseason that has built up all of these expectations and excitement for this team. Rightfully so. There is a certain amount of potential with this team that, I'm not going to just sit here and bash this team either. It is a truly exciting team, and it's going to be a fun team to take a deep dive into. Before we do get started, if you could do me a huge favor, please do hit that like button down below. It is the best way to support this series and my channel right now. Tell those YouTube algorithm gods to push this video out to other NFL fans just like you by racking up that like count. Also, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications so you do not miss any deep dive team previews as we count down to the number one team in my power rankings. So I mentioned it has been a very big, busy offseason for the Miami Dolphins as they head into an also important year 3 with their quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. And that all started with a massive coaching change. Kind of a surprise firing of Brian Flores that, to me, he had really established himself as, at worst, a top 15 head coach in the league. And I would just say he overachieved for a couple of years that set up some unrealistic expectations that he therefore got fired for not meeting, along with some other behind-the-scenes stuff that I just don't really fully understand. I wasn't there, but I do know that Mike Flores was a hell of a coach, that they are going to have to show that Mike McDaniel can be, just to begin with, as good as Brian Flores, let alone better. So a big move there. But on top of that, let's talk about this team's offseason, where Chris Grier, the general manager, to me had his best offseason probably since he's been in charge here, really attracting a ton of talent and not letting anybody really out the door as you look at their key departures here. We talked about Brian Flores. That's going to come with the letting go of Godsey and Stoodsville, the pairing offensive coordinator tandem, if you can even call it that. That's the definition of addition by subtraction. We're obviously going to get into Tua here, but the play calling here was child's play. So good to move forward and really progress on the offensive side as they do bring in Mike McDaniel and a new offensive staff. We're going to talk in depth about this staff in just a moment. But other losses here, Jesse Davis, their right tackle, who's now a backup for the Minnesota Vikings. He was playing because this offensive line was so bad, but they're letting him go because they did go and get Teron Armstead in free agency, one of the biggest lands any team could have hoped to make, getting that franchise left tackle. And then they even double dipped on the O-line, attracting Connor Williams, who's been a long-term quality starter for the Cowboys. So just improving that offensive line was, the biggest priority for the Dolphins, and they pulled it off. And then they let Devontae Parker go in a trade to the Patriots, clearly not afraid of losing him, sending him interdivision there. But they add Tyreek Hill. That, to me, was the biggest addition any team made outside of Russell Wilson to the Broncos. And that includes Devontae Adams. I love Adams. He would be right up there on that list, probably third. But Tyreek Hill brings an element that nobody in the NFL does. He is the most explosive, dynamic playmaker in the league. So not only do you get the biggest free agent add, you make a trade that's the biggest acquisition any team made this offseason. Again, not including Russell Wilson and I guess Deshaun Watson as well. But yeah, huge offseason. They also signed Cedric Wilson, bringing in another Dallas Cowboy, ideal wide receiver 3. who we'll talk about with this wide receiver core a little bit more. But they signed 3 running backs as well. Chase Edmonds from Arizona, Sony Michel from the Rams, and Raheem Mostert is going to follow. Mike McDaniel over here from San Francisco. And then the defense, you noticed, not any departures, truly. The only one you could consider is like Jason McCourty, who played under 400 snaps for them. So keeping the defense intact, really running it back on that side of the ball, keeping their defensive coordinator as well, and then adding Melvin Ingram into the mix as a rotational third down rusher. So a spectacular offseason for the Miami Dolphins. And you might be wondering, like, well, what the hell? They were 9-8 last year, and they had this great offseason. How are you ranking them 22nd? Clearly projecting them to finish probably worse than 9-8. And let's face it, this team started 1-7 last year. Their first win was against rookie Mac Jones in his first game of his career, and you won 17-16. Then they go and lose 7 straight games and then get hot at the end of the year. But did they really get hot, or did they just play a bunch of scrubs? Because look at these wins. They beat the Houston Texans, run by Tyrod Taylor. They were 1-8 at the time. This was before Davis Mills took over and that team became a little more competent. They did beat Baltimore in that crazy Thursday night football game where they just broke Lamar Jackson with 0 blitzes. So tip of the cap for that one. That was their best game of the season by far. But then they beat Joe Flacco's Jets. They beat the ghost of Cam Newton against Carolina. We all know what that offense looked like when they signed Cam Newton. It was one of the worst in the league, behind maybe just their next win being Mike Glennon's Jets, which was literally the most statistically inefficient offense of the last 10 years. So they beat them. They beat Zach Wilson's Jets. Decent win. They beat Ian Book's Saints. Then they get crushed against the Titans and somehow rush for 200 yards against New England in Week 18. Tua threw for 100 yards, and they beat the Patriots. So that was their second best win of the season. They did not have this incredible team last year. I think you look at their wins and say, all right, they're not going to go on a run like that where they're basically gifted 5 or 6 wins. So to me, they have to improve dramatically from the team they truly were last year. And you can say I'm just hating on the Dolphins and all this stuff. It is what it is. That's a real thing. I've used examples like that in deep dives past to show why a team's record was fraudulent the year before, and it has proved to help me be accurate in this series. So I'm going to stick to my analysis there, and Dolphins fans are going to complain about it, but it is what it is. That is why I think their 9-8 record last year was a bit fraudulent, if not a lot fraudulent. But let's get it back on track here and talk about this new staff in Miami that does have me really excited for the long-term projection here, starting with Mike McDaniel, who is a Kyle Shanahan disciple through and through. He's like the Kyle Shanahan disciple of all Kyle Shanahan disciples. He has been right at his hip pocket since literally every year since 2011 in Washington, in Cleveland, in Atlanta, and now in San Francisco. Frankly, it's a miracle that Mike McDaniel has not been hired yet. So I do think they did a great job to attract him to Miami, and he is going to bring, of course, that Shanahan offense, which is predicated on wide zone run schemes that balance play action into the mix and take nice shot plays on play action and really use a lot of pre-snap motion as well with kind of gimmicky play action type manufactured touches for receivers on jet sweeps and bubble screens and all that stuff. So that's going to be what this offense looks like. Picture what the Niners have done with like Deebo Samuel, using him as a running back with that wide zone run game with all these speedy running backs, some of which are following McDaniel over here, trying to get the corner on nicely blocked wide zone stuff to get those explosive runs. It is going to be a significant upgrade in scheme from what they had last year, where they were literally just running a college RPO offense that was incredibly frustrating. And whatever you think about Tua, and I certainly have things to say about Tua, this is an offense that can at least make him look like Jimmy Garoppolo did for Mike McDaniel. And we'll talk a lot about that player comparison in just a moment. And then they also bring in Frank Smith to be their offensive coordinator, coming from most recently being the run game coordinator for the Chargers. But he has a really impressive breadth of experience working for some of the bigger name coaches of the last decade or so. It started in 2010 under Sean Payton as a position coach for 4 years. He then went and worked for Adam Gase for the Bears, getting a little bit of that Mike Martz modern pro spread influence after already having some of that schematic stuff with Sean Payton. Then Dowell Logains comes in while he's still there in Chicago, and he gets a little bit more of that power pro style type of influence, the Mike Mularkey influences. Then he goes to work for John Gruden, very similar to Sean Payton, a lot more spread, inside zone out of shotgun, that modern pro spread scheme. And it's more complicated than this, but when you really want to talk about what types of offenses are being run in the league, there's two major categories. You have the Shanahan branch that really is a lot more under center, wide zone, play action heavy. And then you have kind of the modern pro spread branch, which has a million different categories and subcategories. But at the core, those offenses all look pretty similar. So you have Frank Smith that comes from a different tree that Mike McDaniel knows. And I think he's going to be there to provide some really good influence for third down passing concepts, which I would say if Kyle Shanahan has a weakness, it is the true drop back passing game. Whereas Frank Smith is coming from a bunch of coaches and offenses that really focus on those more traditional drop backs and stuff. So I do think he's the perfect kind of influence to help Mike McDaniel. And he's got so much experience to help out a young Mike McDaniel who's only, 37 years old, 39 maybe. So I love that hire of Frank Smith, and he's going to have a good opportunity to kind of ascend here in his first opportunity as an offensive coordinator. So I do like this staff quite a bit. It's a young staff. It's an unproven staff. But I think Mike McDaniel spending all that time with Kyle Shanahan being his run game coordinator and Frank Smith being a former run game coordinator, I think their run game is going to be much improved this year, especially from a coaching perspective. It's been anemic for the last couple of years. And I think that's a huge area of optimism. And then from a pass game coaching perspective, I like these guys ranking 22nd, and that's pretty good for a brand new staff with plenty of room to grow there. So I like the staff hires there. And then defensively, they're just keeping it all the same. And Josh Boyer is a super qualified defensive coordinator. And if he does a good job here, I do think he's going to ascend to being a head coach candidate, because then you can kind of look and say, well, he was probably behind the scenes pulling a lot of levers there for Brian Flores, or at least he's learned under Brian Flores how to be a great defensive coach like that. It's the same scheme, man. And it's the Belichick 3-4 hybrid system. Where we'll definitely talk about how they're going to deploy all these different players, but a team that at the heart wants to manufacture pressure with disguised looks up front, moving guys around, confusing protections, while also being able to play press man coverage on the back end, be incredibly versatile with your coverages, versatile with your position pairings. It is a chess piece type of defense that is being deployed in Miami and has always been deployed by Bill Belichick in New England, where Josh Boyer worked for 12 years. So he was their defensive backs coach for 6 years, by the way. So a very qualified defensive coordinator with a big opportunity this year to basically take the reins of Brian Flores' defense and prove the ownership here right, in that they can repeat the excellent defensive coaching that they've had here without Brian Flores. It's not a guarantee, but I do think Josh Boyer is poised to pull that off, and that's going to be a huge aspect of this team, meeting their expectations of being a playoff team. Is this defense is going to have to be that top 10 unit and not lose a step with the defensive coaching, because to me, Brian Flores was a top 5 to 7 defensive coach in the NFL. So it's important that Josh Boyer can keep that going. They're going to take a little bit of dip in defensive coaching from what they would have been with Flores, but obviously taking massive strides up on the offensive side of the ball as well. So definitely a lot of optimism about this staff. The question is, can they overcome the quarterback here, who is Tua Tagovailoa, who I ranked 29th in the league, and based on how he's played in the league right now, that's projecting significant growth because Tua has yet to prove not just that he's a starting caliber quarterback, but that he can be the better quarterback on his team and a franchise quarterback that was worthy of the number 5 overall pick. You'll see right there, I rank Teddy Bridgewater, their new backup quarterback, higher than Tua Tagovailoa. Now, the hope obviously is Tua can, maximize this situation, and as a young guy, improve in some areas and become a better quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater. But there's not a single piece of tape, stats, or frankly, physical ability that says anything about Tua actually being a better quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater, who played relatively solid for the Broncos last year. So it's a huge year for Tua, who has certain strengths for sure. I think he has the ceiling of a Jimmy Garoppolo, a guy that can be a starting quarterback for your team. And the similarities between him and Jimmy Garoppolo, it's not just as far as the caliber of quarterback I think Tua can be, the actual strengths that these guys have. It's remarkably strange how similar these guys are. Both guys are excellent in their release and ability to throw off platform and run this version of an offense. And it makes so much sense why Mike McDaniel is such a Tua truther, because you look at what Jimmy has done, it's basically being that point guard for a well-orchestrated offense filled with run-after-catch threats where he can be a ball handler, make quick reads, get the ball out with a rapid release so that ball is in your playmaker's hands, a half a step sooner than an average quarterback, which in a game of inches, that's an angle that the ball carrier can get on a pursuing tackler to make the guy miss or to outrun him to the corner. The other thing is enough mobility to be a threat off of the play action boot game, where you can't have those unblocked defensive ends crashing down on your run game because the guy can boot out and run and throw on the move. So, Tua absolutely has those traits that Jimmy Garoppolo has, and that gives you a baseline in this offense, especially with these receivers that we're going to talk about, that makes you feel pretty good that he's going to have his best season here, given the new offense and the playmakers here. Now, the other thing with Tua that's very similar to Jimmy Garoppolo is how effective he is in the drop back passing game. I think Jimmy doesn't get enough credit for his ability to process defenses and get through his progressions and be a solid decision maker. The problem with Jimmy, and I'm telling you, it is insane how similar these quarterbacks are. It's almost like Tua has only watched Jimmy Garoppolo tape or something, because Jimmy has an issue where twice a game, he's just going to not see a linebacker or a buzz safety, and he's going to fire it right into his hands. And Tua does that even more consistently. So that's a huge issue with Tua in the drop back game that he has to clean up this year. He's got to become a better decision maker and limit those turnovers. And you might say, oh, he didn't throw a lot of interceptions, or he hasn't thrown a lot of interceptions. He's had a bizarre amount of dropped picks. And I'm not just saying that off of emotion. Last year, of all quarterbacks that started at least half the season, Tua was third most in the NFL in turnover-worthy play percentage, despite only throwing 10 interceptions. Above him, Ben Roethlisberger and Jimmy Garoppolo. So there you go. The marriage between him and Jimmy G as a comparison just continues. And it wasn't just 2021 either. You go to 2020, his rookie season, the only quarterbacks with a higher turnover-worthy play percentage than him in 2020 would be Mitchell Trubisky, Nick Mullins, who played for the Niners, Jalen Hurts, Drew Lock, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Carson Wentz, actually Drew Brees, Ryan Tannehill, Sam Darnold, and Tua. So this dude does not take care of the football. And those numbers are going to regress back to the mean, and he's going to throw an ass load of interceptions if he can't start to process those middle of the field defenders and not rapid fire interceptable balls twice a week to those players. One more thing he has that is almost identical to Jimmy Garoppolo is a lack of arm talent. And I think Jimmy even has a stronger arm. So it does hurt his accuracy down the field. Now, Tua has some touch, man. He throws some beautiful balls. And those are the plays that Dolphins fans look at and throw at you on Twitter. I acknowledge that, man. When he gets a clean pocket and he can really step into the ball, he is accurate. But if he has to throw any bit off platform and can't lean on his mechanics, and he doesn't have a clear lane to really process that thing, he does not. His arm does not do him any favors. He'll miss throws. He will short arm throws, and I will say it. I genuinely believe Tua has the weakest arm among all 32 starting quarterbacks that we are going to preview in this series. And that just takes his upside and cuts it in half. So to me, Tua can be Jimmy Garoppolo. He can be a quarterback that, hell, if you have an amazing offense with perfect play calling like Jimmy has had and a great defense, he can go on runs and be a serviceable top 20 quarterback in the NFL. But the Niners, rightfully so, were looking to evolve from that at quarterback. And I do think that is where you will eventually get with Tua. But for these next 2 years, when you have this amazing surrounding core and hopefully an improved offensive line and a play caller that is hopefully going to be the second coming of Kyle Shanahan, that's to me a best case scenario, is that Tua is Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, the other side of this is Tua continues to play like he has the last 2 years, which to me is about the 35th best quarterback in the NFL. A fringe starter, a guy that doesn't have the arm talent to elevate your offense, a guy that makes too many mistakes for a guy that is a game manager, and you bench him, just as he's had to go to the bench in recent years, as they've had guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I suppose we'll just throw in the fact that he is an injury risk as well, and that led to Jacoby Brissett coming in and potentially playing better than Tua did on this Dolphins team last year. All quarterbacks in that 30 to 40 ranking, all looking relatively similar, although Fitz played much better than Tua was as a rookie. But you have Teddy Bridgewater here, who to me, as I said, is a better quarterback right now than Tua. And if Tua really struggles and this team starts off slow, there is a very real reality that this season they turn the keys over to Teddy Bridgewater. He runs this show better than Tua can, and that's it. It's looking for a quarterback in the 2022 or 2023 draft or via a trade next offseason. And I don't think that is a impossible reality. We'll just end up the conversation on Tua and say, I do think it's more likely that he takes steps up this year. I think he's the biggest improvement candidate from that 2020 NFL draft. And he plays like an adequate starter. And they go into next year with him as their starter, and you're feeling pretty similar about how you feel right now, and you're never too excited about it. And maybe you pick up that fifth-year option, and in a few years they do get to the point where they want to replace him. But I don't see any world where you're terribly excited about Tua's upside for this team. I'm really scared that his existence is going to ruin the last few years of Tyreek Hill's prime here. And then by the time you get a real quarterback here, Tyreek Hill loses a step, and all you did was trade away first-round picks to basically waste time here. So I have a ton of criticism about Tua. He is the primary reason I'm lower on this Dolphins team. And I don't think he has the upside to prove me wrong beyond like Hill and Waddle and Gesicki and Mike McDaniels being the reason this offense works. So let's talk about the rest of this offense and why it is such a great roster around Tua that can make him look like a better player than he's been the last few years. So I rank the Dolphins second for weaponry in the league. And that is obviously the heart of any excitement for this Dolphins team this year. They added Tyreek Hill, who to me is the most valuable receiver in the NFL. You might argue Devontae Adams is the best as far as the complete package, being route running, release, catching traffic, hands, that kind of stuff. But I do think Tyreek Hill brings an element that no receiver in the league can bring, and that includes a Jalen Waddle, who's a really special talent in his own right. But Tyreek Hill is both the best run after catch receiver in the league, maybe behind Debo now after his big year last year, but you get the point there. And the best deep threat in the NFL, a guy that has worked at his routes and his release package to be proficient enough in those areas that can maximize his speed. He'll track the ball vertically and all that. Now, here in Miami, they're not going to be able to tap into that verticality in the same way that they were with Patrick Mahomes. They're just not going to be able to do that. It's not going to be available to them. Tua's max throw distance is about 50 yards, whereas Mahomes is like 65, 70. So Tyreek Hill's going to still continue to add value as a deep threat, but it's really going to be in all the ways with this offense that we've talked about on all those manufactured touches and not being Debo Samuel, but being utilized in a similar way where you give him a jet sweep, you line him up as a running back, throw him bubble screens, all of it, you name it. Tyreek Hill is going to provide really the perfect weapon that they needed for this system and for Tua based on his own skill set. So phenomenal move to go and get him. I do believe the best addition any team made this offseason, non-quarterback. Then you have Jalen Waddle next to him. So to me, this is the best wide receiver duo in the entire NFL. And I don't say that lightly. There's some incredible duos, but there's no duo that provide the complete package like this. And I was really impressed by Waddle in year one. Loved him coming out. A guy that has elite speed. And, Tyreek Hill's speed is one of one, but Jalen Waddle is as fast as any other receiver in the league, not named Tyreek Hill. So, man, he just has it all. And it's not just speed. He, like Tyreek Hill, has wiggle with the ball in his hands, wiggle in his routes. He can throttle down, change gears, and that makes him lethal as a run after catch guy. For all of this gimmicky stuff that they're going to do here with McDaniels and Tua and his quick release, but also he can run routes. He can run a stop route. He can break in on a dig and all that. So he is a complete receiver, and just continued refinement of his routes, his release package, which is something Tyreek Hill had to really work at early in his career as a young Jalen Waddle type of receiver. You're going to see Waddle continue to ascend. You hope the quarterback play can be at least good enough that he can continue to produce and climb the wide receiver ranks, but I know the talent's there, whether Tua's getting him the ball or not, and his presence as a vertical threat, it's real. So, again, the best wide receiver duo in the league, in my opinion, right there. Then they go and get Cedric Wilson, who's a perfect number 3 for this offense. And again, what really stood out about Cedric Wilson for Dallas last year was how elusive he was after the catch. It felt like he was so consistently making guys miss down the sideline and picking up 5 or 6 extra tough yardage. So for him to come out of the slot or from the perimeter, whatever it might be, he's going to provide those same aspects and another option as a run after catch threat. But it's not just run after catch for this offense, even though it is a scheme that prioritizes that. He's a solid route runner. He has solid hands. He has good speed and good size. He's a balanced number 3 wide receiver and played that role perfectly for Dallas. I think he's going to fit right in here for Miami. So another sneaky signing that snuck underneath everything else that they did this offseason. And then you have a little bit of depth. You got Preston Williams, who's basically played well every time he's been on the field. That's just been the issue, and that was a question for him coming out of college as well. But a big-bodied guy with good speed for his size, a really physical run blocker as well. So I do think he makes the team. but going to be fighting for reps there for sure. Lynn Bowden Jr. is really just a really poor man's Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle backup, someone that was a college quarterback kind of hybrid player and is just really good with the ball in his hands. Some thought he might be a running back at the next level, but missed 2021. In 2020, he fought his way up the depth chart, got some looks on offense, and looked pretty capable at wide receiver. So we have a very small sample size on Lynn Bowden, but I do think he can play, especially in this offense. Then you have Eric Ezukanma, who was really just a jump ball, go get it type, but he lacks the size to be great at that at the next level. I wasn't a huge fan of his game. They took him a little bit earlier than I would have personally, but we'll see if he can surprise. Trent Sherfield following McDaniel over from San Francisco. They loved his run blocking, decent athlete. So going to be competing there probably with Ezukanma. Probably only going to keep 6 guys here. Braylon Sanders being an undrafted free agent that was a capable prospect, a Senior Bowl guy. Keep an eye on him making the practice squad. And then you get to the tight end room. It's a good tight end room. You have Mike Gesicki, who's kind of a glorified big slot type. He's going to be more of a wing tight end and a slot receiver in this offense than he is going to be that kind of inline Y tight end. He's not George Kittle in this offense because they can't trust him to block like George Kittle did. And, George Kittle's just a special player. So it's not really a knock on Mike Gesicki. He just isn't George Kittle, which isn't a knock. But as a receiver, he's a huge target, nice catch radius, long arms to go pluck the ball. Tua definitely trusts him in tough situations to just go make a play. So to have him around all of this stuff is just another headache for defenses. And he is playing on a franchise tag, so we might see an even more hyped up, excited version of Mike Gesicki trying to play for that big contract, because he does have top 10 tight end potential. He's a smooth athlete, and if he can improve his blocking in this wide zone scheme, they might see him as more of a full-on Y tight end. But going into the year, I think he's going to have to prove that before he starts putting his hand in the dirt a lot more. And I just don't think that's his game. I think he is just kind of this poor man's Kyle Pitts, if you will, which is a compliment. Then we have some depth here. Durham Smythe, huge-bodied dude who doesn't always play up to his size, but a sure-handed, big-bodied guy over the middle of the field. Adam Shaheen, very physical guy after the catch, just not a great athlete to provide separation. But both those guys are going to be, to me, more of their Y tight ends. And we will see Durham Smythe and Adam Shaheen. And hopefully we get to see a little bit more of Hunter Long, who got injured last year. And I liked him as, I believe, a third-round pick. I compared him to Kyle Rudolph as a guy that I wanted to see him improve his run blocking, but just incredibly strong hands. And if he can improve that run blocking, I do think he gets on the field this year ahead of guys like Shaheen and Smythe. But coming off the injury, he's going to have to prove that. Sethan Carter probably doesn't make the team as long as Hunter Long is healthy. He's kind of a wing hybrid type. And then got to keep an eye on Tanner Connor. I do think he's fascinating. If Mike Gesicki doesn't have that big year and they like what they see in the development of Tanner Connor as a tight end, who's just a freak athlete, who was basically a big slot receiver in college, a small school guy out of Idaho State. I think it's not likely, but two unlikely things would have to happen. Tanner Connor to really be this incredible work ethic guy, put on weight, learn how to block, learn how to play tight end, and you'd need Mike Gesicki to not play very good football. And I think Mike Gesicki's a really good tight end. I think he's going to be solid, and they'll either tag him again or want to keep him around. But it is something to at least monitor as a possibility. But definitely a project type that's probably going to stick on the practice squad in year one there, Tanner Connor. And then you get the running backs. Chase Edmonds, smooth route runner, decent after the catch, but just not overly good at making guys miss, in my opinion. Not overly explosive, just solid receiving option. They pick him up because they felt like they needed some consistency in this running back room, and they were right. I don't think there's a huge difference between Myles Gaskin, who I think is just more reliable as a receiver, better pass protector, but not as explosive as Chase Edmonds. You've also got Sony Michel, who, if you can get the ball in his hands, because he's not a good route runner and he does have drops, but if he can get the ball in his hands, he's really good at making guys miss. And then Raheem Mostert's just such an explosive player. He's a decent route runner. He just has major health questions. So even Savon Ahmed there. So they run like 5 deep at functional receiving backs. They're always going to have a guy that's relatively solid in that aspect of the game. It's definitely not going to be a problem for them. Also got to keep an eye on Zaquandre White. It's a tongue twister. Really shifty dude, underutilized in college. Crowded room here for him to make it, but a lot of talent for him to be a better pro than he was in college. But yeah, these guys can't all make it. So I think some of these players will be picked up elsewhere. In general, it's just a deep, solid room of receiving backs, but no particular one guy that I'm like, oh, he's going to go off. He's going to be awesome. I think they're going to kind of go hot hand both on early downs and in the receiving game. And none of these guys I truly believe are going to stand out. Even Chase Edmonds, who they paid a decent amount of money. I think he's fine. Let's move on to the offensive line, and this is an interesting conversation because they obviously invested a lot in this group. They needed to. This was the worst offensive line in the league last year and the year before that. It's another reason, Tua has had such a hard go of it in the NFL. So I do think it's going to be improved, obviously. You add Teron Armstead and you add Connor Williams, 2 of the bigger offensive line free agent signings. But to me, you still have 2 huge weak links, and even Williams and Hunt are far from studs as pass protectors. I don't think they're liabilities like Eichenberg and Austin Jackson are, but one star player in Teron Armstead can't block for everybody. So they still only rank 28th in pass protection, but that's a few spots higher than they were last year, and at least jumping up into a tier gap of competent offensive lines, whereas last year it was just a bunch of backups and Robert Hunt. But let's run through these guys left to right. They land Teron Armstead, who is one of the 5 best offensive tackles in the NFL when healthy, and that's a pretty big caveat. He's consistently missed at least 3 or 4 weeks a season, so that's something you got to keep an eye on. It's unlikely that Teron Armstead plays the whole year, but you hope you at least get 14 games out of him and you're happy with that. It's why his contract, it was big, but it wasn't he wasn't getting 4 years, $100 million like a Trent Williams deal or anything like that. No, there is an acquired injury risk with him, but the hope is, he'll be out there for the majority of the season. And when he's out there, he's got the whole package. He's got size, foot speed, hand placement, strength, you name it. So he very rarely loses in pass protection, and just to have him anchoring one side of the offensive line, even if it's not your blind side, because Tua is a lefty, you're stoked to have that in here. It's something that they've dreamed of having for the last couple years. So big signing there. Left guard Austin Jackson or Liam Eichenberg. It's unclear which position these 2 guys are playing. Both guys college tackles. Both guys have struggled at tackle in the NFL. So Austin Jackson to me has struggled even more. His lack of development is not just concerning, it's frustrating. He was one of the worst offensive linemen in the NFL last year. He's been horrid since he got into the league. Year 1, he had the excuse of, he donated an organ to a loved one and was physically recovering from that. So you understood that, but into year 2, he was supposed to be a much improved player, and it was just as bad. He ends up sliding into guard, couldn't pick up a blitz, couldn't handle any stunts, struggled with power. He's just a bust, man. I'll be stunned if he plays good football. I'll be stunned if he holds on to this job as the year goes on. They owe it to themselves to figure out if he can develop, and maybe he stuns. But it was that concerning with Austin Jackson that I'm certainly not betting on that. I would bet that he probably ends up getting benched at some point here for a Greg Little or a Michael Dieter or Solomon Kinley, even Robert Jones. We'll talk about those guys in just a minute, but he's a big reason that this ranks pretty low still, is Austin Jackson. They bring in Connor Williams, who's a just adequate pass protector. He is not the biggest, most powerful guy. Now, it's also worth mentioning here, you guys, he's currently working out at center for the Dolphins. It's no guarantee that this is their unit. I should have led with that, but I do think their best offensive line is running it back with Michael Dieter, who, you know, he's been their center. He was their second best offensive lineman last year, and rolling with Connor Williams at guard. Again, they owe it to themselves to find out if Jackson and Eichenberg can play in some combination. And the way you do that is playing Connor Williams at center. Now, the other thing is this wide zone scheme really maximizes players' athleticism and protects lighter centers in pass protection because they're so consistently on the move and they're able to use their balance and their get off to their best advantage. And as a center, Connor Williams actually has immense potential in this scheme. So we might see the best of Connor Williams' game, where he's been in more of a power drive blocking type of offense in Dallas. This scheme very well may protect his lack of an anchor as a pass protector and maximize his foot speed and hand placement to the point where he ascends to being maybe one of the better centers in the league. He is a really smooth athlete and a guy that's started at tackle, moved into guard, now he's a center, has seen it all. So I do like Connor Williams, and it was a nice signing here, but he has his deficiencies in pass protection as well. If you're going a traditional drop back and he's in a one-on-one, you don't want him going against really powerful rushers because he will get overwhelmed. Robert Hunt at right guard is like the one thing they've been able to do on this offensive line, and I think he'll look even better with hopefully a better offensive line around him. He's that kind of traditional mauling guard, a guy that played tackle in college and is just a much better guard. Now there's a chance they move him back out to tackle and experiment with some other combination, but I don't like that. Robert Hunt is at the best at guard, and I don't think he's even a good tackle because his foot speed is not good. He is good in a phone booth. He is a pile driver. He's relatively quick off the ball. I think he can, for such a big guy, I think he can run these wide zone blocks, but it's not going to be a huge strength for him. But I think he'll be just fine in the run game, which we're talking about pass protection here anyway. But in pass pro, it's more about his anchor and his grip strength. He can lose to stunts and quicker rushers as well, but he's far from what you're worried about here. You got Liam Eichenberg at right tackle. I liked Liam Eichenberg coming out, and I was disappointed in how he played his rookie season. Now, they were moving him all over the line, so hopefully they can just put him at right tackle where I think he belongs, either at right or left, and he can work on getting a little more play strength, which is something he needs. He's a lighter tackle, and just really, he was a left tackle in college, played a little right, but just focus on right tackle and learn the position and develop. I still believe in Liam Eichenberg, but it was not pretty in his rookie season, and he is coming into the year a major question mark. So someone that will get overwhelmed by power, someone that has shorter arms. It's why they probably think he might be a guard, but if that means you're putting Austin Jackson at tackle, I think that's even worse because you've got Austin Jackson now protecting Tua's blind side. No freaking thank you. That's a recipe for disaster. I think Eichenberg is at least a little bit better in pass pro and should be trending up. Your depth is concerning at tackle. It's Greg Little, who has good play strength, and that's about it. Has not shown an ounce of development in the NFL as he was a second-round pick. Adam Pankey, career backup. Larnell Coleman is an interesting seventh-round pick from a couple years ago, I think now, if not last year, but lengthy kind of traits-based developmental prospect. Maybe it takes a surprising step up this year. They draft Kellen Diesch. Some people thought this was some remarkable steal of an undrafted free agent pickup. I did have a draftable grade on him, but I did see him as pretty overrated. A tall guy with a lack of arm length is not a good combination because he lets guys up into his chest way too easily, and then he gets top heavy. So I'm not a big Kellen Diesch guy, as many people were, I don't know if he'll even make the team. We'll see. The interior depth is much better. You got Michael Dieter, who has started a lot of games for this team. It's nice to at least have a guy like that as a backup. If not, someone that could play guard, or maybe you put Williams back at guard like we described. He's at least functional. You got Solomon Kinley, who's definitely a people mover up front. He's very similar to Robert Hunt, just not quite as sound and proficient in pass protection, and not as proven as a run blocker. Really struggles with quickness and blitz recognition and stuff. So that's what's kind of held him back, going back to his time in college. But a good backup, if nothing else. Robert Jones fits right into that category as a guy that is a pile driver, a mauler, but probably a better fit in the former power run game than he is in this wide zone blocking scheme. So there's your offensive line from a pass pro perspective. We're going to revisit it in just a second and talk about the run game. But let's rank this passing game as a whole, where they rank 21st in the league for me, which is a major improvement from what they were last year. So 29th at quarterback. I do think we see some improvements in Tua, and he walks out at the end of the season at least looking like a starting caliber quarterback, something like a Jimmy Garoppolo. They have the most dynamic group of weapons in the league as far as explosiveness goes. Hopefully an improved pass blocking unit to at least get in defensive linemen's way a little bit more than they were last year. And a young coaching staff that I think shows a lot of promise early on. But let's now talk about the run game. And let's go right back to that offensive line, talk about anything we may have missed. So they rank 27th for run blocking, and that does factor in the skill blocking with it. So Teron Armstead at left tackle is a better pass protector than he is a run blocker. I am excited to see him in this wide zone blocking scheme because he is a really good athlete and good on the move. So he might have one of his better run block seasons, similar to what we saw with Trent Williams going from more of a spread style offense with John Gruden in that offense. Jay Gruden, same scheme, to working with Kyle Shanahan and basically returning to what he was when Shanahan was in Washington. But he's not Trent Williams, but I think he might be a better run blocker in a system like this. But regardless, has always looked better moving backwards than he is kind of dominating guys, controlling guys moving forward, but still very good in run block. Austin Jackson is strong. If he can get in the right spot and get his hands on you, he can move you, but that's a big if. I'll just say that. As far as his assignment awareness, his ability to consistently play with leverage, to land those hands, to get the right get off, it's just an overall mess for Austin Jackson. Connor Williams, we kind of alluded to how he fits this scheme really well, but he really uses that leverage he has he's not a shorter dude, but he just plays low. He gets off the ball well, uses his hands well as a run blocker. He has been a strength for the Cowboys, and I think he's going to be even better as a run blocker in a wide zone blocking scheme because he is such a good athlete. Robert Hunt's a people mover. We kind of talked about Robert Hunt already. And then Liam Eichenberg, another one of these guys that maybe in a wide blocking scheme will look much better as a run blocker. But going back to Notre Dame, it wasn't a huge strength of his. And last year, it certainly wasn't pretty. But he is a really smooth athlete. So at least as a wide zone blocker, I think he can get that edge, seal a defensive end, maybe climb to a weak side linebacker. That's why I like him at tackle more so at guard, where I just don't think he's going to move a lot of people. But I think because he lacks some of that play strength, but I think he can at least get to spots and use his agility and athleticism and core balance to be a more functional run blocker in year two. And then you got some powerful backup guys for run block. But I would say all of Greg Little, Dieter, Kinley, Jones, none of these guys are the best athletes up and on the move and aren't ideal fits for the blocking scheme, but are all functional run blockers as backups. So just a touch better in run block than pass blocking, but still some concerns, ranking 27th. But let's talk about the rest of the run game here. I think we've already talked very much about Mike McDaniel and kind of what the scheme's going to look like and how optimistic I am that he's going to provide a really creative run game. And I think as the talent here develops, thanks to his coaching, you're going to see this run game in time and maybe within this season become much better. But there's still a serious lack of talent from a run game perspective left over from a Dolphins team that has had an anemic run game the last couple years. I think, wasn't Ryan Fitzpatrick their leading rusher in 2020? Like, it's been that bad. And that starts with the running back room that they are hoping they can overhaul massively. And I do think they were the worst running back room in the league last year, climbing up to 30th this year thanks to a couple of nice free agent signings. You get Chase Edmonds, who in my opinion is just a third down scat back, but in a wide zone blocking scheme, he has some vision and some speed to the edge. Not going to break a lot of tackles. I wouldn't even say his speed is like home run speed, but he does fit the blocking scheme, and I think he'll be okay as a rotational early down back. Sony Michel actually played pretty well for a wide zone blocking scheme for the Rams last year. He's a really gritty runner, gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes because he was a first round pick, but I do think he's the best they have as a true running back, and I think he's going to have a little bit more production than maybe some might project. They have Raheem Mostert, who, if he's healthy, is their best running back, especially in this system where we've seen him be a terrifying home run threat runner with the best speed I think any running back has had in the NFL since Chris Johnson. Just watch his long touchdown run against the Jets. Like, it's absurd how fast he is at top speed. So if you get a perfectly blocked run and he's healthy and he's at top speed, he's gone. Watch him in the NFC Championship against the Packers. Like, he has a really high ceiling, but he can't stay healthy. So it's just a nice dart throw to, get him back with Mike McDaniel and say, hey, maybe he can get healthy and have another couple nice years. It's unlikely, but it's good to know he's there. Myles Gaskins, just a really scrappy, tough running back, jack of all trades, master of none type, just held back by his athleticism and his kind of lack of size. Savon Ahmed, I think was actually originally on the 49ers, didn't make that deep running back room. And yeah, he definitely has that speed element to be a good fit here. So they might want to keep him around as opposed to Jared Dokes, who's more of a, thumping between the tackles type. Zaquandre, man, I just can't rip that name off. Zaquandre Wright. Man, Zaquandre White. That's a really tough one, but he's got a lot of athleticism, someone to keep an eye on, maybe a practice squatter. A ton of depth with this running back room, but barring a healthy, rejuvenated Raheem Mostert, there's nobody in this group that you're scared of. So long term, I do think they're going to want more talent in the running back room. But it's a functional group for what they have right now. You also get a little bit of a QB run multiplier. Tua is a threat when they go read option. I do think it's a little bit limited because I don't know how much they're going to want to tap into that with his injury record. But I'm sure they will from time to time, and he's definitely a play-action boot threat, which is also a part of the QB run multiplier. So, a third of a percent boost to the run game as a whole from that. That's going to put them right in the middle of the league, 16th for that metric. And then the rest of the run blocking here, honestly, it's not very good. Your receivers aren't the best run blockers. Tyreek Hill, more just runs off blockers, just runs deep and forces you to follow him. So I guess that's useful. Jalen Waddle does a little bit of that as well, but he's got a little bit more size and a little bit more Nick Saban influence to be a more established run blocker. Cedric Wilson has no interest in blocking the run. Lynn Bowden, smaller dude. The rest of the guys that might make the team would probably be your best run blockers. Preston Williams definitely likes to buy into his size. He's had some good run block performances. Trent Sherfield is the reason he's here, is because he's a pretty good run blocker. And Ezukanmo was a good run blocker at Texas Tech. So there's your receiver group. And then the tight ends. Mike Gesicki is a problem as a run blocker. He's slender. He has never been a good run blocker going back to Penn State. He plays more snaps as a slot receiver than he does as a tight end. So more receiver than tight end, Mike Gesicki. And if they were to play him as a wide tight end, you're definitely worried about defensive ends and even linebackers peeling off of them and shutting down that wide zone. That wide tight end is just as important as your tackles if you're going to the strong side on those wide zones. So I do think that he's going to have to really ball out as a receiver for this staff to want to keep him, because how much they prioritize the run game in this system. But that's why you have 3 deep of big-bodied guys. Durham Smythe has led the team in snaps at that wide tight end spot in recent memory, so he's going to get the nod as your tight end 2 to start the year, I think. But I think Adam Shaheen, a much better run blocker, could very quickly surpass Smythe, and with good health might be your day 1 Y tight end, which is going to be a starting role in this offense. Shaheen definitely the best run blocker of this tight end group, and with the right buy-in, I think actually could become a valuable piece of this offense. Hunter Long need to see some significant improvements as a run blocker if he's going to get playing time over Smythe and Adam Shaheen, but the potential is definitely there. The size is there. And then you have Alec Ingold as well. Really nice fullback signing. I think he's one of the 3 to 5 best fullbacks in the league, and an offense that obviously with Kyle Juszczyk values the fullback position, and I think they got the best utility back that they could have gotten, because Juszczyk wasn't going to be available for them. So that is a notable addition to get Alec Ingold, and I'm not going to say he boosts the run block grade up entirely, but he is going to be an asset and is going to be a weapon leading the way for these wide zone blocks. So the run game as a whole, it still only ranks 29th. Obviously, the blocking and the running backs is a big part of this, but the meat and bones is there with the coaching staff. I think we'll see some development as the year goes on, but definitely some talent deficiencies in the run game, and they have been a pretty bad run game as of late, so not a huge surprise that they're only ranking 29th there. I should at least mention, I know we're getting really long here, but we're having fun. It's all good. They will use these receivers out of the backfield, and it's really hard to factor that into a formula that I have here. And I would just say that's a part of the run game coaching, is like, I think they're going to creatively use receivers and manufacture some good runs out of that. I don't know how consistent that's going to be or how much that would boost the run game, but it is worth noting. I think you see a little bit of Waddle and a little bit of Tyreek Hill kind of in the backfield, used in creative ways, and that'll be both in the passing game and impact the run game. But they rank overall 23rd for offense after that is all pumped out. I think it's going to be a much improved offense from what it was last year. How could it not be? But held back for some of the reasons that we've talked about, most notably being Tua and the offensive line still. But let's move on to the defense. And fortunately, we are getting a little bit longer with this video. This is a defense that I think most of us are pretty familiar with. There is almost no movement on this defense, and even schematically, it's going to look identical with the same defensive coordinator here, Josh Boyer. They are going with the if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach here. So I do expect this to be a really good defense. As we start to look at the pass defense side of things, I rank them 10th in the league. Let's start with the pass rush. So I rank them 22nd. Typically, the Belichick style defenses prioritize run discipline and contain over true, genuine pass rush. And it's some of that is here, but they do have some pretty good pass rushers here as well. It's a very solid unit from that point of view. So you have Emmanuel Ogbah, who had a huge year last year. He got a big contract extension, definitely deserved it. You know, he's the perfect scheme fit because he can play a little 4-tech. He can man up on the tackle. Like, he can play 3-4 defensive end. He'll play 4-3 edge. And it's definitely worth noting that these guys are going to play all over the place because of this scheme. And I'm going to do my best to say all of the places these guys will line up and when they'll do it. Ogbah is more of a passing downs guy, but he can hold his own against the run. He's just not great there. And we'll talk about all these guys as run defenders too. It's a lot. It's a lot, these deep dives, man. But Agba is a stud. He has power. He has get off. He has size. But I do think last year he really improved some of his technique. I've seen him now win with cross chop moves and spin moves. And I'm really impressed by his development. I didn't think it was going to go this way when they acquired him. I don't even think they did based on the price point. But earning a massive contract, and he's their best pass rusher pretty clearly. But Jalen Phillips on the other edge spot definitely has potential to become even more than that. And if he can ascend to, being an alpha pass rusher, which I do think is his potential, he has all the tools to do it. It just wasn't all there in his first year. He was solid. He definitely showed flashes as a rookie, but was more in part of a rotation. But I think expectations are pretty high for Jalen Phillips, and I think he's kind of a X factor for this defense, because if he happens to reach his potential in year 2, which is unlikely, I think he probably shows some growth. But if he becomes let's just stick with the grading scale, becomes a 85 here and a true number 1 rusher and a star, this pass rush elevates to top 15, and this defense probably becomes a top 7 to 5 defense, if not even higher. So he's definitely a swing factor for the defense. Again, has all the tools, was solid as a rookie, and it's a big year 2 for him. I think we also just need to stick on the edge with the guys listed in the depth chart, because Andrew Van Ginkel plays on early downs, and he's a functional pass rusher, just really uses his quickness. They'll use him on stunts really well to manufacture pressures for him, but he can win one-on-one. Just lacks all of the traditional physical tools, whether it's get off, length, power, speed, bend, but a quick dude and a crafty pass rusher that is really good at a lot of different stuff as well for this defense. He's a coverage booster as well for what he does dropping into coverage. Very much this defense's Kyle Van Noy. Melvin Ingram is the one addition that this defense made, and I think he's going to be a chess piece pass rusher. You're not going to see a ton of snaps from him, but I think that's going to keep him healthy and effective when he does get out there, and he very much still had it for the Chiefs, but was forced to a lot of playing time. And I think this is actually the perfect role for him at his age, where third down, you slide Agba in a little bit, and you can line up Ingram off the edge, let him go to work, get him one-on-ones. He's a really nice addition here. So even if he's not playing every snap, even if he doesn't get you 50 pressures because of his, total snap count, I do think he's a booster here. Then you look inside, and it's a functional duo. Christian Wilkins a really good pass rusher. He's just not the most athletic guy. That was always the bill on him coming out of Clemson. He's never been this consistent dominant threat as a rusher, but he'll have some nice wins in there, and he does it in different ways. Sometimes it's power, sometimes it's quickness. A true jack of all trades, master of none as a pass rusher. We'll talk more about his impact as a run defender when we get to that side of the ball, but very solid. And then Zach Sealer is, to me, I think, going to take an uptick this season as a pass rusher, because last year Adam Butler actually got the most pass rush snaps next to Wilkins. And again, it gets really murky because Agba will slide in and be that second interior guy a lot of the times. But there is room for another kind of starting interior dude. And I think as the year went on, they realized that Zach Sealer is better at the Adam Butler role than Adam Butler is. So Butler's still there. He'll eat into some of those snaps because they love him and they love what he can do dropping into coverage, where he's like the best coverage defensive tackle, maybe, I don't want to say ever, but he's good at it. And Zach Sealer just became a more productive pass rusher on a per snap basis, earned more snaps as the year went on, and was impressive. I think there's even a little bit more upside in there if they ask him to play even more. Has some quickness, has some length and power, and just kind of in a way, a developing veteran, but has just been an all-around pleasant surprise. So he's solid at worst, with maybe a chance to be even better this year. And that's really what you're getting from the interior. Raekwon Davis is going to be more of an early down piece. John Jenkins, rotational run defender, and then some youth there. As far as any more edge depth worth mentioning, Brennan Scarlett will rotate, played a decent role last year, but only so many snaps to go around for him. They pick up Porter Gustin, who's been a good all-around rotational player for the Browns. They draft Cameron Good, who's kind of another hybrid linebacker type. I think he's kind of another... he's in the mold of Van Ginkel and Brennan Scarlett as well. So just kind of a depth piece that may or may not make the team initially. Darius Hodge fills into that category as well. So a really deep group of edge players, but in general, the lack of a true star pass rusher is what keeps this group out of the top half of pass rushes. You don't have that one guy that you got to circle in the game plan and start to, double every play. But in general, a good pass rush. Then you get the linebacking coverage unit, and Jerome Baker's just really good, getting better as well. Gets that contract extension before last season and started to play some of his best football. So really good athlete, definitely getting comfortable in this scheme. Might even continue to trend up. Elandon Roberts poised to be what he was last year as this team's number 2 linebacker. And they do a great job protecting him in coverage. So it's not a true average of Baker and Roberts. As you see, the linebacker coverage grade is much closer to Jerome Baker. And you also got to factor in what Andrew Van Ginkel does, dropping into coverage as well off the edge. But Roberts is that thumping middle linebacker in the Belichick system. They keep him around the line of scrimmage. They blitz him. They'll play him up like head up on the nose sometimes. But he can't cover if he does get put in compromising situations. But it is noteworthy that they protect him very well in this system. Channing Tindall is fascinating, as he was their first pick in this draft. Now, I still don't know why they didn't take Leo Chenal over Channing Tindall. We'll see how that plays out. But Tindall, a freaky athlete with size, who played a bit of a unique role in Georgia's defense. Sometimes a blitzer, sometimes a coverage dropper as a strong side, 4-3 odd backer. Like he did a lot of different stuff, kind of had to wear different hats because they had such a deep, talented linebacking group. And I think they really liked that from him. So an athlete with that hybrid background, he's going to appeal to a Belichick-style defense. And I don't think he beats out Elandon Roberts, maybe even this season, but you got to keep an eye on him maybe doing that. They got Duke Riley, Sam McGuavin. Both guys are capable backups, I would just say. So it's definitely not the worst linebacker room. You want to keep Jerome Baker healthy because the rest of these guys you don't really feel great about. Duke Riley would be the backup in that situation because he is more of that cover backer, but I would just say a decent duo that makes sense together. Not a major impact on this defense, but far from a liability as well. Then you get to the coverage and the DB coverage. They rank 7th in the league, and it sounds low, but they have more weak links than some of the top secondaries in the league. But there's very few trios as good as Byron Jones, Xavier Howard, and Javon Holland. These guys are spectacular. And for a defense that loves to go to man coverage, to have 2 guys as good in press coverage as these guys with the long striding speed. Xavier Howard didn't run the fastest 40 time, but he's so physical and his strides are so long that he eats up space and very rarely gets beat vertically over the top. So his physicality, his ball skills are just legendary. Like Xavier Howard at a point in time could have probably suited up and played receiver for this team. So Howard's a true CB1. And then you got Byron Jones, one of the better CB2s in the league. And he's the better athlete of the two, just isn't as technically sound. But man, he's also just locked down in press coverage and plays into this scheme perfectly. Hasn't quite had the ball production of Xavier Howard and has lost more consistently, but that's life as a cornerback too. He's one of the better ones in the league. And then I want to talk about Javon Holland, who was my number 1 safety in last year's class, and I think played even better than I thought he was going to as a rookie. And that's saying something. I had lofty expectations for him, but God, from the moment he got on the field, he looked like a top 10 safety in the league, and it's everything. He can go man coverage on tight ends, slot receivers from the slot. He can go single high free safety in cover 1, cover 3. You can run quarters and he can do everything from that coverage. You can run him in a buzz and he's really kind of instinctive at reading the quarterback's eyes with good ball skills. He's an athlete. He's got size. And then we're going to talk about what he does as a run defender too. Like he to me can be a top 3 to 5 safety in the league sooner rather than later. He's sensational. And I think he's even trending up. So love Javon Holland. The guys other than that don't necessarily get me as excited. And I'd say that's why they're 7th and not 1 or 2. You have Eric Rowe, who doesn't even play all their snaps. You know, he basically split time with Brandon Jones last year, and they'll kind of take Jones off the field or, different packages, different places, different formations with these two. But Eric Rowe is the clear-cut better coverage player between the two. Brandon Jones, I actually think, is a bit of a liability, and the fact that he's going to play 350, 400 coverage snaps for you, I do think that knocks them down. But when it is Eric Rowe, a guy that's a former corner and definitely comfortable in all of the man coverage that they want to run, so good flexibility there with Javon Holland. He's a really good tackler in space. He's actually, to me, a better run defender than Brandon Jones. So I don't get why they don't just play Eric Rowe all 1,000 snaps. Maybe they don't think he can hold up health-wise, but he's a very solid safety, maybe even a little bit underrated. But again, half the time you're going to be picturing Brandon Jones there, who to me was just a box safety with a lack of athleticism coming out of Texas and has proved to be nothing more than that. And he hasn't even been great in run defense all the time to the point where it makes sense to play him over Eric Rowe. So I disagree with the staff's assessment of Brandon Jones, but they are going to play him, and I do think teams can go at him when he is out there. And then at slot corner, it's looking like another year of Nick Needham. We've been waiting on Noah Igbenogany to figure things out. The dude's only 22 years old now, heading into year 3, but how long are we going to sit around and wait on this guy to figure out how to play football? I think his lack of physicality in the run has kept him off the field, so that's a starting point for him. But even when he's been out there in coverage, he's really struggled with route anticipation and closing those gaps and being a good coverage player. He is a smaller guy. He hasn't improved his press technique. So until he shows that development, it's looking like another year of Nick Needham, who's, if you could put Nick Needham in Noah Igbenogany's body, you might have one of the better corners in the NFL, because Needham is the complete opposite. He has no physical tools at all, was like a 7th round pick, if not an undrafted guy, but has really improved his agility where he can. He plays with anticipation and he jumps routes and he plays physical against the run. So he's fine in the slot, but with that lack of speed and physical ability, you will see him lose. So you'd want to do better there. But I think it is going to be another year of Nick Needham, most likely, unless Noah Igbenogany can figure it out. I do think Igbenogany has all that potential, but it's all on him at this point, because we know this defense is conducive to player development and players and making the most of players. Keon Crossan behind him is also worthy of keeping an eye on, because he's kind of been around all of these Belichick teams. I believe he was drafted by the Patriots, ended up on Bill O'Brien's Texans for a little bit. Now here, they're all just kind of trying to replicate what happened with Jonathan Jones, who was undrafted and then became a really good corner with real legit speed. So maybe he can kind of put things together and be this team's cornerback 4. There is kind of a notable lack of depth here with Trill Williams, who's a year 2 undrafted guy, who I think needs to play safety, along with Quincy Wilson, who's a physical, slow corner, Elijah Campbell, D'Angelo Ross. I don't think any of these guys are emerging as the 4th corner. So it is a clear runway for 2 really good athletes in Crossan and Igbenogany to step up this year. And I think it's relatively likely one of those 2 guys has a breakout season. And then your safeties, we already talked about Brandon Jones. I'm just not a big fan of his game. I actually like Sheldrick Redwine in coverage more than him, but just no no comparison as far as run defense. Clayton Fejedelem, capable backup veteran type. And then they pick up Verone McKinley as an undrafted guy out of Oregon. McKinley is a smaller dude. He doesn't have great speed, but I did think he was one of the smarter, more instinctive safeties in this class, and definitely should have been drafted by somebody. And to pick him up as an undrafted guy, man, it's a long road for him to become a starter because of those lack of physical tools. But he's kind of Javon Holland light and doesn't have the physical tools. But it'd be fun to see that Oregon secondary be recreated here. I don't think it's likely, but I think it is possible. It was a good pickup of a draftable player, in my opinion. A good move for a team that barely had any draft picks. So they rank 7th for DB coverage because of some pretty clear, not liabilities, but non-strengths, I guess. Obviously a really good secondary, though, and rounding out the 10th best pass defense. And then as we convert this to look at the run defense side of things, they also ranked 10th there for me. So the front changes when you talk more about early down run defense work. And again, you got to keep in mind, I'm listing Davis, Sealer, Wilkins, Van Ginkel as kind of the 4 base guys up front there, but there's no true package that's like their go-to run defense look. But one thing that is going to be relatively consistent in their base defense is Raekwon Davis at nose, Wilkins at 3-tech, and Sealer either as another 3-tech if you go with a true like base 3-4, or Sealer is like a 4-eye type, and you'll see Agba in that position. You'll also see John Jenkins come in for Christian Wilkins. There will be snaps where Jalen Phillips is out there instead of Andrew Van Ginkel, or you'll see Brennan Scarlett rotate in there, who played really well last year. So these guys are going to be all over the damn place. Their snap counts, the positions they play, all over the map. But the 4 guys I wanted to highlight up front, who I do believe lead the team in run defense snaps, are going to be the 4 guys you see right there. Van Ginkel on the edge, Wilkins at DT, Davis at nose tackle, and Sealer as kind of a hybrid end 3-tech 4-eye type. But Van Ginkel, he plays his role so well. I mentioned that he's basically this defense's Kyle Van Noy, and it's ironic that they both are, 3-name guys, Van something, because he's the same guy. And Van Noy was just an unsung hero for the Patriots until he did it so many years that eventually we started recognizing him for how good he is. But that's Van Ginkel. I think this is the 3rd time I've used this. He's a jack of all trades, master of none linebacker, and he plays on the edge. But what he does best is as a run defender, and just spaces himself well, contains his gap with a ton of discipline, just a reactive run defender with adequate strength. And he's going to steal reps from Jalen Phillips and Agba and Melvin Ingram, and for good reason. And it's early down work. It's the ability to also drop into coverage. So he's definitely someone you gotta know about on this Dolphins defense. He's a good player. Then Christian Wilkins, total star in run defense. The leverage he plays with, he is just a stocky dude, really smart guy, brings all the energy and strength you want to see. I do think he's one of the better run defending defensive tackles in the league. So you got that in there. Raekwon Davis, he doesn't grade out well because of what he's asked to do, and also just like he's a weird build for a nose tackle. But what he is big. He's like 6'7", and he played a lot of edge at Alabama, so he's not used to like, two-gapping and taking on a bunch of blocks in the middle. But he has put on weight and been a completely different player for Miami. I think he might even have a better year this year in year 3, but he does play his role pretty solid. Like he demands, he just eats up space so that everybody else can navigate around him. So his presence alone boosts things up. But that said, he's not very good at getting off blocks. And because of his height, he does get moved off the ball pretty easily because he doesn't have like that true anchoring ability of a normal nose. So he's not the perfect nose tackle, but it is hard to find guys that are 6'7" that can relatively hold their ground, and he plays that role pretty well for them. I think Benito Jones would probably be the backup in that role, maybe John Jenkins a little bit. And then Zach Sealer, a lot of it is scheme because you do have Davis eating space. Wilkins is the guy that's incredible at getting off blocks. But when Sealer is lined up in one gap and they ask him to just shoot a gap, he can just dominate that gap. And he is graded out incredibly well as a run defender. He has a ton of like TFLs and he makes splash plays, it feels like, every single week. So it's very role specific for how big of an impact he is as a run defender. If you asked him to play Wilkins' role or play Davis's role, I don't think you'd get the same results. But for him to just kind of be that agent of chaos in the run game with his energy and his quickness, it's a weapon for this run defense. They tend to use Agba as more of a rusher as opposed to a run defender. I think he's like 3-1 as far as pass rush snaps to run defense snaps, but he'll be out there as well as kind of a base end on earlier downs sometimes. 5 tech. He can even play a little 4-eye. Never been a great run defender, but he can hold his own. He's athletic. Jalen Phillips has been unproven against the run at the NFL level, but has potential to be a good edge run defender if they need him. But again, they can only play so many of these guys. Ingram, if asked to defend the run, will do it. He did it for the Chiefs last year pretty well, but I don't think he's going to play against the run much at all this year. So they got a million bodies here. They're going to move them around. I really like this D-line. I love how they're deployed. Everyone has their role and they play it well. So they rank 7th for D-line run defense. As far as the linebackers go, it's not really Jerome Baker's game. He has improved his tackling, but with his size, he's like 220 pounds. He's just never going to be a great run defender, and that just is what it is. But that's why you put a Landon Roberts next to him. And he is a full-size thumping linebacker. They ask a ton of him. They'll ask him to basically play the Donta Hightower role and line up over the center to take on guards and shoot gaps and be a force against the run. And sometimes he can handle it, sometimes he can't. It's just a big ask. There's only so many linebackers that can do that. That's why I think they're hoping Channing Tindall someday can be that guy, just with more physical juice and strength. But Roberts brings the IQ and the mentality to defend the run. So I do respect him as a run defending linebacker, excuse me. Duke Riley, again, just kind of that coverage backup. Sam McGuavin, against the run. So it's really about Landon Roberts, and Channing Tindall definitely has potential to be the Roberts replacement, whether that's this year or in the future. They rank 22nd for linebacker run defense, and then the DB run support, they rank 8th. Love what they're getting from this group. Almost an impossible group of perimeter corners to seal off. Both Byron Jones and Xavier Howard use their length and strength really well. Maybe the best run defending cornerback perimeter duo that we have in the league. And then Nick Needham in the slot. A slender guy, can't always get off blocks, but a high energy dude and a solid tackler. So he's fine there in the slot. Both the backups there, Igbenogany, Keon Crossan, real liabilities against the run, slender dudes. But then Trill Williams, if he makes this team, might be a interesting kind of Nick Needham backup as a slot corner if the other guys can't fill into that run defense role. Trill is a really physical, instinctive player, not unlike Nick Needham as a player because they both have a lack of long speed. But then the safeties, Javon Holland, when they play him in the box, is just everywhere. He is so good at dipping in and around blocks, ultra instinctive dude, secure tackler who can hit and pop you. Love what he does as a run defender, as a blitzer. Literally just whatever you ask Javon Holland to do, he's going to do it damn well and has all of the traits to do it. He's not built like Jamal Adams or Derwin James, so yeah, he might get locked up from time to time. But again, he uses like his athleticism to get around those blocks if he feels like he's going to get locked up a lot of the time. So he's a huge booster to the run support. When they play him deep, though, you will see a lot of Brandon Jones down in the box. He's a fine run defender, but that's really all he is. I really think he's just kind of a backup third safety, in my opinion. He will miss tackles. He will get locked into blocks. He'll have some splash plays against the run as well. But I was a little surprised they played him 600 snaps when I thought Eric Rowe shows to be just as good in that role and is a way better cover player. So again, I think that's interesting. The rest of the safety depth is against the run. So they rank 8th for DB run support, in large part thanks to Javon Holland. And then, of course, a really nice perimeter corner duo that will crash down as well in more tight packages. So you end up with the 11th ranked defense. I think there's 2 areas for potential here for this to get into the top 10 and beyond. Number one would be that pass rush. If Jalen Phillips can take a huge step up in year 2, that's going to elevate this defense and make things a lot easier on the secondary if you go from a good pass rush to a great pass rush. And the other thing would be Josh Boyer answering the call of this being still one of the top coached defenses in the league. I think, I rank him 9th. That's a lot of respect given the fact that Flores just left. But if they can get back to being a top 3 to 5 coached defense, which I think they were under Flores, then that will also push this defense up. So definitely top 10 potential defense, and it certainly isn't hard to see them getting there. They also rank 11th for special teams. I like this unit. Another situation where they got to prove that they'll play hard on special teams for Mike McDaniel, just as they did for Brian Flores, but no indications based on how good they were covering kicks and making their kicks last year that they'll be any worse. So you can definitely see the potential for this team to exceed my 22nd ranking. I think especially on the defensive side of the ball, it's pretty easy to see a top 10 projection coming through here. But the question is going to be, how much can that offensive line improve? Can you get anyone else to step up, be it Eichenberg or Austin Jackson? Can Mike McDaniel prove to be the offensive mind that we think he is capable of being? And then, of course, how much can you get out of Tua? I personally the concept of a high ceiling with Tua, it's just not there. But can you get Tua to be the 21st best quarterback in the NFL this year, as opposed to the 29th, which is already to me an optimistic projection? Then you're going to end up with these playmakers and this play calling. Maybe you are a top 20 offense with a top 10 defense. And in this AFC, you can sneak in as a 7 seed or a 6 seed. I think that's possible. The question to me is always going to be, if 2 is enough, but for this year, I do think playoffs are possible. It just really stinks that the AFC is as good as it is. We are going to wrap all this up by looking at their schedule and where they come in with my projections. So it's definitely not an easy schedule for them. I mean, their first 4 games, you've got the Patriots, the Ravens, the Bills, the Bengals. That could be an 0-4 start right there. I think they can steal a game or 2. Lightens up in the middle for sure. You got Jets, Vikings, Steelers, Lions, Bears. They're going to have to win probably all of those games if they want a chance of not just making the playoffs, but beating their Vegas over-run of 8.5 wins, because, you've got Week 10, the Browns may or may not be Deshaun Watson. I leave it as winnable for now, but with Watson, I wouldn't expect them to win that game with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney and those guys rushing against these tackles. Even without Deshaun, that's not going to be easy. You do get the Texans at home, but then Niners, not expecting a Mike McDaniel's revenge win, even if he is familiar with the offense. Chargers, maybe the last laugh in your face for taking Tua over Herbert, as you might be seeing Tua out the door at this point. Bills, Packers, Patriots on the road, and then Jets. I am betting the under on this. If the schedule was easier, like we've seen for some of these other teams, I definitely think this defense is going to keep them in a lot of games. And Tua with this offense, you can see their formula for winning football games. And again, with an easier schedule, you might get there. But I am betting the under. I actually made this bet after I took a look at this schedule. I think there's a lot of value there at plus 115. A lot of people betting on this Dolphins team with Tua's reputation and the moves they made this offseason. I do think they win 7 or 8 games, but I don't see them getting, maybe to 9, but I don't see them winning 10, 11 games this season. I'm just much more pessimistic about Tua and the offensive line, and I think this staff needs more talent in those departments before they get to that 10-11 win range. And that's just my opinion. You guys can definitely comment below where you think I'm right, where you think I'm wrong. What do you think about this ranking at 22? Whether you agree or disagree, I really appreciate it if you could hit that like button if you're enjoying the series. Make sure you subscribe as well so you don't miss any of these deep dive countdowns. It's going to be a long one. I think this might be our longest deep dive, but definitely a team that deserved the attention. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in a few days for the next deep dive. Peace out.